So this is a Lebanese movie that was nominated for an Oscar recently, for Best Foreign Language Movie, and it lost to Roma, and I get it. Roma is beautifully shot, it looks stunning, and a lot of people loved it. I didn't like it much at all, but it makes sense. I do get it. But I've also seen 2 other of the nominees, Cold War and Shoplifters, and I really liked those. They were really compelling stories, and Cold War was stunning too. Now this one isn't that great looking, it's fine, but it's nothing extraordinary. However, it's probably my favorite out of them. It's a pretty great movie, and it just goes to show that for me personally, the story and the characters matter way more than the visuals. If the visuals are great, that's a bonus, and I really appreciate that too. But as long as the movie looks fine, the story and the characters are what really matters. And this is such a compelling movie in that regard. It's absolutely heartbreaking. It's about this young boy who's serving a prison sentence, and he's fed up with how things are, and how he's been treated his whole life, and essentially blames his parents for his situation. So he decides to sue them for being born, for birthing children into the world, which on the surface can seem pretty silly and even ridiculous, but it's actually pretty profound, and he's definitely got a point. And the court case is really just the framework for the movie. It's not really what it's about. Most of the runtime is spent on telling the story of how he ended up in the situation he's in. And essentially he's just a poor boy, born into a poor neighborhood, to parents who have way more kids than they can handle or really even afford. I mean, he's more or less left to fend for himself at the age of 12. The cultural differences compared to what I'm used to are also pretty stark. Just the way these people live and look at life and raising kids. I gotta admit, it's kinda rough to watch, and knowing it's reality for a lot of people makes it that much worse. But the kid, he's a good kid. He's loving, he's caring, he's just great. It's a great character and a surprisingly great performance too. I mean, I immediately felt for the kid and sympathized with him. It took me almost no time at all to get into the story and the characters. And following his journey, everything kinda makes sense, you know? There's only so many ways you can turn out if this is the environment you grew up in. And he basically defies the odds. He doesn't become this terrible human being, with twisted moral values and no sense of love and caring. He did some terrible things, but it's all motivated by love and his own sense of justice. Or by him just not knowing what else to do, being at his wit's end. And that sense of love and what's right is nurtured by this immigrant woman, who's also in this quite a bit, and she's really good too. And their dynamic is great. In fact, pretty much everyone is really good in this. Even the baby. This is probably the best performance I've ever seen by a baby in a movie. It's quite remarkable, and I do hope his real life circumstances are a lot better than those in this movie. Anyway, the boy and the woman are just both hustling and trying to survive, in their own ways. But things aren't going their way, and the whole system is stacked against them. And there are very few ways out of their situation too, which becomes pretty apparent. There's just no winning when you're dealt cards this bad. And while the movie does get a satisfying ending, and even feels sorta uplifting, it's not a particularly happy end. All things considered, it's still pretty bleak. And I guess that's one of the points the movie is trying to make. There's not a happy end for a lot of these stories. Real life's not a fairy tale, especially if you're living in some of these more impoverished parts of the world. And you know, there's a fair amount of humor in this too. It's pretty dark humor, and it sorta has to be, considering the circumstances. And that gives the movie and these characters this sense of, I don't know, unwavering will to keep going in the face of terrible adversity. Because they keep trying to make the best of their situation, even when there's not much hope to cling on to. So even when it gets dark, it never becomes this bummer of a movie that's just depressing to watch, which it easily could have. It also never gets preachy, which is some sort of miracle, considering the kind of stuff it deals with, a lot of it being pretty horrific. And it seems like it tries its best not to cast any judgment on any of the characters either. It realizes that they too are a product of their environment. They too grew up in this world, and it made them who they are. They're not necessarily evil people, but they can do better. So yeah, I love this movie. But would I recommend it? Yeah, go watch it. Or don't. But you should. However, I'm still not your dad. But I am trying to sell out, so consider liking, subbing, hitting that bell, and supporting me on Patreon. Because I really need some clean running water and a warm meal. And hey, why not drop a comment below and check out another review? I'd appreciate it. Thanks.